Do you struggle to figure out whether or not certain foods are good for you or not? Do you wish you had a scanner that you can use in the supermarket to quickly tell you, okay, this food is good, buy more, this one is not so good, stay away from it? You know, why does it have to be so difficult figuring out what's good for us and what's bad for us when it comes to foods that we choose? Well, you know, it does not have to be so difficult, and in this video I'm going to discuss 10 questions that you can ask yourself when trying to decide between different foods, and specifically which ones are good for you and which ones may not be too good for you. For those of you meeting me for the first time, I'm Dr. Amina, Goodwin, a physician and a health coach, and I help overweight people with blood sugar problems figure out how to fix those problems without taking more medicines. All right, so we're going to dive into it. Food, good food, bad food, or foods that are good for you versus foods that are not so good for you. How can you tell the difference? How can you make better choices for yourself and your family when you go supermarket shopping? Well, it comes down to several questions, and I have chosen 10 questions that you can ask yourself to get instant answers about whether or not a food is good for you or not so good for you. The first question is, all right, how does this food make me feel when I eat it? Do I feel good after I eat it or not so good? Do I feel sluggish, sleepy, tired, achy about 1 to 1.5 hours after eating this food? If the answer is yes, then you know you should probably not eat this food, certainly not very frequently. Foods that sap your energy are foods that you just want to stay away from as much as possible. Second question. Is this something I would give to a diabetic knowingly? I know this person is a diabetic, loved one or friend, whatever. Can I give this food to a diabetic? You can usually tell, and if the obvious answer is no, then it's probably a food that you should not have yourself as well. I like to say that we should all eat like diabetics. The fact is, if we continue eating in these ways that many of us are eating, overindulging in sugar and so on and so forth, we could very well end up becoming type 2 diabetic in the future. And in fact, we know that cases of type 2 diabetes are increasing, not just in the United States and developed countries, but in developing countries as well worldwide. We should all eat like diabetics. That's the only way for us to decrease the amount of diabetic cases, new diabetic cases coming on every year. All right. Third question is, would my grandmother recognize this food? This is the grandma test. If your grandmother came back or your great grandmother and went in your kitchen, would she recognize this food that it is that you have there for yourself, right? Now, further from that, if it's a food that you cooked or prepared in somewhere, or rather, if it's a packaged food, would she recognize the ingredients on the ingredient list of that packaged food? And if they can answer to any of those two questions, since no, then this is probably a food that you want to stay away from as much as possible. You want to be able to recognize the names of what you're putting into your body. And if these are not names of actual foods, but instead ingredients or factory manufactured chemicals or processed things, then these are things that you need to stay away from as much as possible. So that's the grandma test. If grandmother doesn't recognize it, then probably put it back, okay? 4, would a health nut eat this food? So we know, all of us know that there are these health conscious people, and sometimes they are labeled as health nuts. I've been called a health nut multiple times before. It doesn't bother me. But anyway, a health nut is somebody who's health conscious. They are very careful about what they put in their bodies. And so if this is a food that you're trying to decide what to buy, you can ask yourself, hey, would a health conscious person eat this food, And if the answer to that question is no, then again, probably not something you want to buy or certainly consume on a regular basis. Question number 5, are there any unfriendly ingredients in this food? So as much as we want to have foods with helpful, beneficial ingredients, right? Probiotics, good fat, protein, fiber. Also, we have to be careful about unbeneficial or harmful ingredients in the food, right? So you look at your ingredient list and decide, all right, are there any unfriendly ingredients? Some examples of unfriendly ingredients: aspartame, artificial sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, monosodium glutamate, maltodextrin, anything that you don't recognize, any name in the list that you do not recognize, that would be an unfriendly ingredient most likely. And so this is a food that probably is not the best for you. All right. Question number 6 to ask yourself is, does this food go bad? Can this food go bad? A lot of us would recognize that, especially when it comes to baked products, the breads, some of the buns and muffins and cookies. these things just don't seem to get moldy anymore. When we were growing up, if you kept bread for longer than 2-3 days, you started to see mold growing on it. But a lot of the foods that are available commercially now in the supermarkets, they just don't go bad anymore, you know? And so that is a sign. What is in this food that prevents mold and other living organisms in the environment from growing? These foods now are so sterile that nothing wants to grow on them. And if you think about the fact that, okay, if there's some sort of ingredient in the food that's blocking or inhibiting the growth of things like mold and just basic bacteria that might not be that harmful, generally speaking, what are those ingredients doing to your body? Remember, our bodies have good bacteria, a good mix of bacteria that help make us healthy. Now, if those ingredients in the food are preventing environmental germs from growing on the food, what are those ingredients doing to the good germs in our body? Those ingredients would be killing those good germs in our body and therefore negatively impacting our health. So if you're having a food that ordinarily should go bad and it's not going bad, then that's a food that you do not want to consume too much of, because in the long run, it's going to affect negatively your health, your body. Those chemicals blocking the germs will affect your health in the long run, okay? Seventh question to ask yourself is, when it comes to foods that, okay, they're packaged, because we can't get away from packaged foods and some degree of processing, how long is the ingredient list? And specifically, is the ingredient list longer than 5? The more ingredients beyond 5 in the packaged food, maybe the worse it is for you, generally speaking, all right? So consider the ingredient list, and the longer it is, the worse it is for you, the more likely you should just avoid it in the long run, okay? The 8th question you should ask yourself is there added sugar in this food? And if yes, and this is something you see on the nutritional label, if there's added sugar, is the amount more than 8 grams? Every 4 grams of added sugar is 1 teaspoon, and we should have no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar in a 24-hour period. So if your packaged food has more than 2 teaspoons, then you start thinking, okay, my limit is going to be reached pretty quickly in the day, right? And if you get to 6 teaspoons, which is 24 grams and beyond, then you've definitely surpassed your limit in just one serving of a specific food, and that, you know, you have nothing left for the rest of your meals, okay? So more than 8 grams of sugar in a packaged food, you might consider putting it back, but, you know, certainly bear in mind that you're going to reach your limit pretty quickly, okay? 9th question you should ask yourself is, what's the balance of macronutrients? So in our foods, the main food nutrients, energy nutrients, would be protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And you want to have an almost equal amount of those nutrients, generally speaking. Maybe less carbohydrates compared to protein and fat, but generally speaking, the closer to a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of those nutrients, the better it is. So when you're looking at cookies or other foods, maybe packaged meals and so on and so forth, you would like to see that you have 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of those macronutrients. A lot of snacks available now and foods in general are predominantly carbohydrates, and they're less fat and less protein. A lot of things are actually fat-free as well, but we can't get away from the fact that fat is a beneficial nutrient that is needed by all the cells of the body, especially brain, of course, but all the cells in general, right? And so if your food is lopsided in terms of the nutrients, and you're eating mostly lopsided foods or lopsided meals, then you're going to end up being deficient, generally speaking. The most nutritionally complete food is actually milk, whole milk, where you have almost 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of those 3 macronutrients. And so you want to not have too much carbs and then too little fat and too little protein, okay? And then the 10th and final question to ask yourself when it comes to trying to figure out whether or not a food is healthy is, can I get away with eating this food every day for the rest of my life? If you cannot honestly answer yes to that question, then that food is probably one that you should consider avoiding as much as possible, you know, because it means that you know deep down that this food will negatively impact you in the long run, okay? So those are just 10 questions for those of you who really struggle with deciding if a food is healthy. I see questions on social media all the time. People are putting pictures of the different foods and asking, Is this food healthy? Can I eat this? I'm diabetic. Can I eat this? And if you just go through these 10 simple questions, how does the food make you feel? 2, would you feed this food to a diabetic? 3, would grandma recognize this food? 4, would a health nut eat this food? 5, are there any unfriendly ingredients? 6, does the food go bad? Is it able to spoil? 7, is the ingredient list greater than 5? 8, is there greater than 8 grams of added sugar in the food? 9, is there a good balance of the 3 macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates? And 10, can I get away with eating this food every day for the rest of my life? If you cannot answer these questions honestly, right? Or rather, if you can answer these questions honestly and mostly the answers are what we went over, then these are foods, or the specific food is one that you should consider avoiding as much as possible. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, definitely go ahead and share it with somebody who you know that's struggling with trying to figure out how to eat in a healthier fashion to get good health, which is long lasting. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again on the next video. Bye bye.